welcome back to the SBP Podcast Mobile Filmmaking. You're listening to episode 152, and guess who I am? I'm your host, Susie Botello. On July 13th, 2021, I published an episode 103. It was called The Proximity of Film and Identity. And it starred our guest for this show that's coming up in a couple of minutes here, Brionne Olsen. Brionne is an audio engineer, a filmmaker, and a storyteller. He is in South Africa. And when he was here the last time, he talked about a summit that an online summit, and it was a virtual summit, as a matter of fact. And that was in 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020. And it was partially the reason why he attended that summit. But it inspired him to start thinking about mobile filmmaking. And he made a film which was in our film festival in, I think it was in 2021 or 2022, whenever that was. He made that film, he submitted it to our film festival, and he was also part of our mobile filmmaking community after we met in the podcast. I'm going to add a link in this podcast to the article that I wrote most recently about the Blair Witch Project, because it was a game changer for filmmaking, and he was part of an experiment that we did, and I'm not going to say too much more about that because we're going to talk about that here in a couple of minutes. But yeah, you're going to enjoy this, so just kind of kick back, chill. Speaking of chill, I heard it snowed in South Africa, so we're going to talk about that with Brionne. And while it may be snowing in South Africa, I don't know what the weather is like where you are, but it's really hot here in San Diego and California and all over the place. The weather is just a little wacky. Well, it's quite wacky. It's whacked. Okay. So anyways, let's go ahead and talk to Brionne, shall we? Hey, Brionne, how are you? You're over there in South Africa where it's snowing like crazy, huh?
Hi, Susie. How you doing? Yeah, it's the southern hemisphere, so we obviously in winter, but it doesn't often snow in South Africa. While certain parts in South Africa do receive annual snow, but up in the close to Johannesburg, it kind of snows like every 10 years. So the other day we were traveling from the coast, went on a mini break with the family, mid-year break. And on our way back, it started snowing and we stopped the car and we took a couple of photos and some videos. And 5 minutes later, it was gone. There was no snow. It was like a quick flash snowstorm. And as soon as it stopped, it was gone. As soon as the sun comes out in South Africa, nothing stays.
Yeah.
So yeah. But it was a nice experience for the kids. my oldest son, he wasn't feeling too well, so he wasn't having it. He was like, we can just go home and open up the fridge. There's a lot of ice in there.
Oh.
So yeah.
What they call the party pooper.
Yeah, he wasn't feeling so good. So, aww. But yeah, it was cool. Everyone loved it. It was something to do, and yeah, then we came back home to Johannesburg to the most coldest day that we've experienced in a long time. Unusual weather patterns happening in and around the world.
So, hey, everyone, this is Brionne Olsen. He has been in our podcast before. Quite some time ago, we were just joking, saying it was 4 years ago, a little while ago. But it hasn't been 4 years ago. I think it's been more like 2 years or something since.
I think it was 2021.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
It just feels like, it was back in the 80s, right? So, but we were talking to Brionne because Brionne's been a good friend of ours. We met him basically because I reached out to him to be in the podcast because, he was shooting documentary style, YouTuber style videos, right, about traveling. And I thought that was really cool. And we met through this podcast, made a new friend. And then I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but I wrote an article about, I'll throw the link in there because I mentioned you. You mind, Brionne?
Yeah, do
All
it.
right.
No, you can
because that article, I did some extensive work with it. It took me a while to write it because I was referencing the Blair Witch Project. And what happened was that Brionne and a couple other people, we teamed up on Clubhouse, the audio app that is not as popular anymore, like a lot of things, right? And we did this little exercise where we pretended, sort of, that Brionne and Jason C. Marshall were, the two guys from the Blair Witch Project, and we were going to go out and experiment and see if the Blair Witch Project could be shot with a smartphone today as opposed to all the other cameras that they had. And it was a lot of fun, and we had a conclusion, and I guess you'll have to read the article to find out what happened. But Brionne was, I think he was Mike, was his name. You were the guy with the sound, and the reason why I bring that up is because you're an audio engineer.
Sound engineer. Yep.
Sound engineer, yes. Which is incredibly awesome. And one of the reasons why Brionne is back in our podcast is because, I always find a great excuse to bring people back, right? But Brionne made this film. I'm going to call it a film because it was beautiful. It was last year, right?
Which one you
The
referring
Elements
to?
of Movement?
It was actually this year.
Oh, it was this year. See, time is just...
Yeah, it's very fresh.
Very fresh.
I think I made it in May of 2023.
Wow. Well, it's a beautiful... We're gonna put in the notes the link to that, and also the link to the making of the BTS video as well.
Yeah.
The sound on that video was excellent as well.
Thank you.
Yes, of course it was, because you did it. Why don't you share with our listeners, a little bit about how you came about to even shoot that video, what inspired you or motivated you or whatever, how you got to make that video, and also a little bit about the making of that video.
Very, very interesting process of actually making that video, because I always wanted to do a short film, or in that kind of format with dancers and people that are very talented. So just a quick story. Elements of Movement is actually the name of the dance studio that I partnered with the three girls that is in the short film. And they are highly talented girls that have been dancing together since they were very young.
Ballet, right?
So it's contemporary free movement kind of dancing. It's not really ballet, to be honest with you. If you watch that music video, and this is where I actually got the idea from. It was a song that came in a couple of years ago, "Take Me to Church." It had a Russian, and I'm going to butcher it now because I know that it's not a ballet dancer. Right. He's a Russian dancer. And, I always found you expressing yourself through dance such a powerful tool and message. So I definitely this time didn't want to use any dialogue. I just wanted to do like a one take style film. So so that was always in the pipeline. I always wanted to do that. So this opportunity came to make this film, and I fell back on my notes and I was like, okay, cool. I have this opportunity to create this short film now, and I had about 3 weeks to make it.
Wow.
And I reached out to a couple of people. Obviously, I didn't expect like the first group of people to respond to me because, sometimes people don't understand the vision. And I understand that sometimes people are a little bit afraid when they do jump into something new, or they don't know someone and they have to like trust them, to create something. And I reached out to the Elements of Movement, the guys from the dance studio, and they were super keen. They were ready. They worked out a whole entire dance routine because I gave them the brief. I was like, I want something that is expressive, something that showcases power, female empowerment and movement. It's like a warrior style dance, because I don't dance. I've got 2 left feet.
Right.
I wouldn't be able to choreograph that.
I feel for you. I have a lot of empathy for you because I'm horrible at dancing.
It's terrible. It's terrible. My wife thinks I dance, but I think that's just because she loves me.
I've seen you dance in some of your videos. Trust me, you can dance. If you saw me dance, which you won't.
My dancing is corny.
Well,
it's not even serious. I don't even take it serious.
At least you can move, put it that way.
Yeah. So yeah. And then within 3 days they choreographed the dance. We recorded the dance. And I used my iPhone 11. I had a monopod and a gimbal, and I used my anamorphic lens, and that was about it. I had a couple of lights, I think, but I made use of the natural light that came into the dance studio. And
let me ask you something, Brionne, because you mentioned the gimbal as well. Because you were shooting the movements, right, meant that you had to create movements with your camera at the same time to follow the movements and things like that. Obviously, you weren't dancing.
No.
But you had to make some grand movements, in order to follow these things properly and to anticipate. For example, when they raise their arms, you have to anticipate that, and when they're going to bring them down, because you want to be able to follow that and, sometimes get closer to facial expressions and things like that. And so the reason that I was mentioning this was because when I was young, I was using I'm still young. Younger, when I was a teenager, I was using a VHS camera, and I was recording flamenco dancers for my parents' shows, right? And I had to learn and anticipate those things with the camera, when to open up, when to widen up, when to close in, and things like that. So I know that you had to do this with this, and it's different with the smartphone. It's so much easier, right, than with a big, large camera. Yes,
yeah. So with the choreographed dances, and you'll see this in the behind the scenes video, is that I went to go visit the girls during their rehearsals. And that's an opportunity for me to see what the dancers were looking like, what the movements were, so I could plan those kind of movements. So the day that we actually went to record, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew exactly what I wanted to capture. So that was part of the project. Not only was I capturing their movements, the camera itself or the smartphone itself was part of the dance, part of the movement. So I didn't want to capture any static shots because it's boring. And it's just a testament to smartphone filmmaking, is that you can stick a smartphone in any little corner, or you can, stick it on a gimbal onto a monopod and capture those kind of movements. So that's why I enjoy smartphone filmmaking. There's really no, it's really not too hard. The only thing is you have to just be creative, and it allows you to be creative. So yeah, that was such a beautiful opportunity to record that, because it was one of the films that I always wanted to do.
The lighting in the video is also awesome, and because you're moving around from, like you said, from one area to the other, you also had to compensate for the lighting somehow with that, and the shadows.
And that was natural light.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't have any lighting whatsoever. I think I did have like one light in the background, but I did that because I wanted to do the silhouette thing.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to capture the anamorphic lens flares. That's it's a favorite of mine. I love shooting with an anamorphic lens, simply because you don't get the anamorphic look in the native cameras of the iPhone, so or a Samsung or a Pixel.
Yeah.
So it's one lens that I appreciate above everything else. So I try and shoot anamorphic as much as I can. Even with my bigger cameras, I've got my Sony cameras and whatever other cameras I got. I have like anamorphic adapters, or the
filters
lenses
and all that too.
Give those. Yeah. So because I love that, because I love film. And growing up watching all of my favorite films, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, all of those were shot on anamorphic. So it's just beautiful. So cinematic. Yeah. What is cinematic?
Cinematic is what you expect to see in one of those films that you just mentioned.
Yes.
Like it's
a combination.
You don't want
that. It's not just flares.
Yeah, it's not just
the
flares.
21 aspect ratio.
It's the whole package. It's a sound. It's it's everything. But that cinematic look is that smooth film type look. Yes.
Yeah. And I simply just love it, and I try and do that with smartphone filmmaking as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely like, I appreciate the fact that I could gather a group of people that shared in the vision. I didn't know these people. I approached them. They were keen to do it. We did an exchange of agreements, and they came and they arrived, and within 3 days we recorded this thing. And then I posted it in May 2023, I think.
Yeah.
And Again, I create these things because I'm passionate about it. I don't often do it because I want to win awards or have any sort of reactions to it. But it's amazing that people across the world that I've befriended have all come back to me, and they were like, "Wow, that's so beautiful. You captured it so beautifully. The lighting, the sound, like you mentioned, the choreographed dances. There's no funny gimmicks, no filter. I mean, no transition effects. I just did a basic color grade. I don't even really capture that in log, to be honest with you. I just tweaked it, color corrected it a little bit, because I wanted the pure essence of the dances. I wanted to capture the movement because the movements are all messaging. It's messages about empowerment. It's about freedom. It's about a fight. So it was very important for me to capture all of it.
When you said you didn't have to capture it in log format, just so that our listeners know, there are apps that are camera apps, right? That will give you that feature. There's a few of them now. It used to just be Filmic Pro that you could do that with, but there's a couple more now. And not having to do that is actually good news for people who believe that unless you have that feature, unless you do that, you don't get that look, that you can't color grade something beautifully in the way that, when you guys watch this video, you'll understand how beautiful it looks and you'll be surprised.
Yeah. I try to make the process as effortless as possible. And I understand the need to color grade and I understand the need to record in log, but sometimes it's a lot of those things are just noise a lot of the time, and people get caught up in gear and, recording in 10-bit 422 ProRes, all of that. I recorded this in 8-bit on an iPhone 11 in standard color.
And, I have to tell you why that can be intimidating when people start talking about those things that you were just mentioning. Because if someone who's listening to this, one of our listeners is listening to this, and they say, I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. I don't know that I have the patience or the education to talk about log, to talk about 10-bit, to talk about frame rates, all those things. I don't know if I can learn all that. I think that would take the fun out of the dream that I have to be a filmmaker. It's like being a musician. I just want to be a musician, but you're telling me to learn chords and you're telling me to learn beats, all these things. And I'm like, now that scares me. What's really cool about mobile filmmaking is that you don't, and this is what I do want you to talk about this, because I feel like it's intimidating people. And if it intimidates people, then we're going back to, the whole, you might as well just get a professional camera and learn all those things to run a professional camera, right?
Indeed. Yeah. People just get caught up with like gear. And like if you look back at Steven Soderbergh and those guys, right? When they started doing mobile filmmaking, there weren't anything like shooting in log in Filmic Pro, right? It unlocked a lot of features that you get in your mirrorless camera, like setting the shutter speed and dropping the ISO and all of that kind of stuff. But it was still in its simplest form, right? Yeah. And it allowed you to be as creative as possible. It opened up a lot of doors for filmmakers that didn't have the kind of access and cash to purchase the bigger stuff. But you had a vision, you had an idea, you had this passion, and you wanted to create. And that's what smart filmmaking in its purest form is for me, is that you have this tool in your pocket. Everyone says it. Mm-hmm. You have this camera that you have with you all the time, right? Pull it out and record, right? And if you start getting caught up with getting this cage and getting that lens and buying this iPhone, every year upgrading your iPhone, and you got this kind of accessory, and you attaching this depth of field adapter so that you can put a cinema lens on your phone so that you can achieve, a similar depth of field that you would get with bigger, more expensive cameras. Then I would say that rather than buy yourself that kind of camera, because at the end of the day, it's not about trying to get your smartphone to look just like your cinema camera.
Yes.
It's about having the idea. Like once you've purchased all of that stuff and you spent a couple of $1,000s on your gear, what's the plan? What are you going to do after you've attained all of these things? And I think that sometimes, and I blame YouTube for this, to be honest with you, I blame social media in general, because there's this there's actually a word for it. It is called
Gearheads?
No, it's something to do with it's basically trying to accumulate as much gear as possible.
I think you and I probably read the same thing that was on Twitter not that long ago, or on Threads.
Threads
about that. Yeah, we're on Threads now. Brionne is on Threads as well, so he's our Threads bud.
Threadster.
Yeah, Threadster. We're threaders.
Threaders. Yeah, and I think it's so important to just get back to the basics. Mm-hmm. Like, allow yourself to be creative. Don't chase. I mean, I upgraded to the iPhone 14 only now, and that's from an iPhone 11. And I did a side-by-side comparison video on my Instagram, asking people, can they tell the difference? And I posted it on my TikTok as well, and people just kept on saying, I can't see the difference. Like, in good lighting conditions, I mean, like the upgrades are tiny, are different, and I think we get caught up on ProRes 48 megapixels, 24 millimeter focal length, and all of that nonsense. Sometimes it's just noise, and you should not get caught up in that. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be an iPhone. Like, come on, like, there's so many other brands out there that came up with like different like budget option cameras.
Yeah.
Smartphones that are amazing, that are fantastic.
Yeah, from my film festival, which, by the way, you have been in my film festival. We're still waiting to see you in San Diego, where it made snow. No, but
I think I'll bring the snow.
Yeah, the Freedom video that you did. What was that one called?
Finding Freedom.
Finding Freedom. Yes. One of my favorite videos that you've done up until you made this one, of course. But I think what I really liked about that video was the message and the way that you put that together, and the story behind that video as well. But what I'm trying to say, what I'm getting to here, is that usually Brionne, just like what he was just talking about, he had this idea. He had this story, basically, that he wanted to tell. And he wanted to, create that story with a video.
Yeah.
And you've done that with all your videos. You don't go out there and say, well, I'm going to create a video because I've got this stuff. You basically say, I want to create this video. And then the stuff is the tool that you use to create it with.
Yes.
And that's the step, how it should be. The first step is, when I was doing a presentation at Comic-Con one year, I said, what is the first thing, I'm talking about mobile filmmaking, right? And I said, what is the first thing that you have to do? And people were shouting, get your camera, load your battery, put it on airplane mode, all these things. And I said, no, you need a story. And everybody just went, wow. And they laughed because it sounded so simple and so obvious at the same time. But it's the thing that people forget. And all those answers were just part of that point that I was trying to make. You're thinking about all this other stuff, and you're not thinking about the main thing, the story.
Yeah. And the thing is, I'm not saying that, like, there's a whole entire industry with smartphone filmmaking, right? And there's
Yes.
a lot of tools there's a lot of tools that you have access to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that you shouldn't get those tools, but those tools should be with intent. If you're going to get yourself an anamorphic lens, like I love it, and I created all of my films, my short films, with an anamorphic lens because I enjoy the look. But
it was part of your vision to get that look.
Exactly. So if you are going to attain stuff, it should be practical. It should get you closer to your goal. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that you should always do it with intent.
Also, I think what we're also really trying to say is don't get obsessed with the gear so much so that you forget about your vision, because you have a vision for your story, and you want to create that story with what you have first.
Yes.
If you need to go and get something to make that happen, then go get that one thing, but I know, you and I know that things that happen sometimes are, on one side, you're going, well, it's good enough because this is what I've got. And all of a sudden, what comes from the vision that you had is not what you end up creating. It's much less because you're working around what you feel like, well, it's good enough considering, right, that I'm using this. Or on the other side, at the other end of the spectrum, my vision is this, but now I've got all these tools available to me. I go on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or wherever I go, TikTok, and people are talking about this and that. And now all of a sudden, I have so many tools that, your vision is great, and you could probably make it with like 500 tools that you just got, but you're not going to get to make it because now all you're doing is experimenting and learning these tools.
Yeah, you sometimes get caught up in all of that, and sometimes it's completely unnecessary.
It's going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So, all right, how did you do the sound? Because I need to know that, because the sound was just epic.
So it was all in the mixing of everything. So let me just remember what I did.
Now, did you you captured it externally, right?
The sound.
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't. That's what I'm thinking. So the gimbal that I used didn't have the ability for me to attach an external mic. And that's because the gimbal, the phone sits flush against the gimbal motor.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't attach anything externally. So what I did was I captured it through the iPhone. And for some reason it just worked out. I did do some mixing in post-production.
So you captured, now what I was aiming to when I said externally was like you used a sound recorder of some sort. But you're saying that you used the internal microphone that comes with the iPhone?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
and that's on the 11, huh?
That's the 11. And the reason why I did that is, again, I tried to bring as little gear with me as possible. So I was taking a risk. I always tell people that, listen here, when you're doing sound recording, you must always have like redundant sound.
Mm-hmm.
Always make sure that you've got 1 or 2 additional recordings so that if your main recording audio fails, at least you have a backup. And I always advise that. But in this case, I went completely against my own advice. Because I tried to keep it as simple as possible. I needed to record it as quick as possible. I only had that day.
But you recorded some sound bites from the performers.
Yes, So there I had, for the behind the scenes, I had like a little floppy external microphone, the
right.
dead cat on it. those budget, audio recorders.
Yeah.
Shotgun ones. So yeah, for their dialogue and stuff when I was interviewing them, yes, I did use an external recorder.
Okay. Because I was just flipping out for a second there, Brionne. I was going, wow.
For the actual performance, the sound that you hear there,
the B-roll, right?
So
it's not B-roll. I mean, it's
actually
just
the actual performance. Yeah.
Right. It's your natural sound.
Yes. Yeah. It's the ambient
sound.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
I'm going by notes when and editing script. You put nat sound. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Exactly. So for the behind the scenes, yes, I did reuse a recorder for that to capture that. But that was also in camera. That wasn't an external recorder as well. So I was doing.
It was an external microphone, but still.
Yeah, plugged in.
Yeah.
So I did that because again I was trying one man film crew. There was no one there to help me. I had to set up everything. So having to carry all of that stuff with you, I tried to keep it as simple as possible to achieve the goal.
I used to do it a lot in video production. I used to be not the one man, but the one woman, right? Film crew where I would go out. But of course, it wasn't a smartphone, and it was pounds of gear that I, including a tripod and, either a Sony or a Canon camera on top. And I'm not talking about the DSLRs, but I know what you're talking about. You just have to, it's a mindset, because you're setting all these things up and you have to test them and make sure things are working while people are right there waiting for you to capture them.
Yes.
And you almost have to go into that zone. It takes, it's not easy.
Yeah, I try to make it as less of a job to try and set up everything and just get going. I think the only thing that I really brought with me was a couple of lights.
Yeah.
And that was because I wanted to have like a silhouette look, and I could only achieve that with a very, very powerful light. And I had my behind the scenes camera set up to record that, and I had the phone and the gimbal and the monopod.
Wow.
And that's it. And that's because I enjoy making it. I don't want to think about it. And I think it's because of my ADHD, which I recently found out I had ADHD.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because I'm trying to keep things as simple as possible, so I don't have to think too much, and I can just allow myself to feel the moment, experience the process of recording a film, and it's therapeutic.
I was just, darn it, that was the exact word I was just going to say. It's therapeutic.
Therapeutic.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why I enjoy making smartphone films.
And it's a bit like meditation in a way. You're in that zone, right?
Yes.
Because you're focused on that one thing, and you're doing it well. And that's the cool thing about the phone.
Yes.
You're looking through a window. I call it a window because you know that when you're recording on other cameras, what you see is not always what you get. That's why it's important to set up all these other settings and things, like zebra stripes and all that stuff, right? But with a phone camera, you're looking at the screen and you're looking at what's at the other end. It's like a window, and it's like, look how beautiful that looks. And you're all there with it. You are one with with it.
Yes. Yeah, I like the the fact that a lot of the stuff is instant, so you can record it and review it immediately.
Yeah.
I just made sure that my exposure was set properly, and the white balance was set properly. But other than that, most of the settings were standard, and yeah.
Focus, lock focus.
Did I? No, it wasn't. Focus wasn't locked.
I usually
No, I didn't
do
that.
because, especially when there's movement.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's also the fantastic thing about using an iPhone, because there isn't much of depth of field because of the tiny sensors. So the focus, there was never a time that it went out of focus. Yeah, and yeah, I think yeah, I didn't set focus at all. So I was just letting the phone do its thing. I had like a second phone, my little iPhone 6S, and I used that as a monitor.
I love that one.
Because obviously with the phone being up in the air on the monopod,
Yeah.
I obviously couldn't see, I couldn't frame, so I needed like a second device to monitor it. So I had the monopod under my arm while I was holding the iPhone 6S to obviously frame it correctly. And
With the remote?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, with the remote function. So I was able to then obviously see what they were doing from that angle and just move accordingly. So yeah, that was the other thing that I had out of my old iPhone 6S.
I like the 6S though.
Yeah.
It's 6S sounds like success.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I often encourage people to.
So how did you mix the sound? So share some tricks with us so that we could do the same. Not me, but I mean with our listeners, so that they could do the same thing.
Yeah.
Well.
So I edit my stuff in DaVinci Resolve. I actually use the free one. I haven't paid for it because I feel that the free one is
it's fine. It's loaded.
It does so much. And what I love about it, it has a multi-track audio editor.
Yeah.
That has like a lot of like free plugins that you can use to do the mixing. So I just made sure that I isolated the sound. So if there was any noise in my audio, I just like used a noise canceller to clean that up. And it's just like a multi-band compressor and a limiter, and I used a stereo what's it called? Stereo expander type thing.
Okay,
just
yeah.
to open up the sound a little bit. Can't remember what it's called.
Compression?
No, it's a stereo. Basically, it just opens up the frequencies and pans everything correctly to left and right, so that it just opens up a little bit more. Can't remember what it's called, but it's like all the standard stuff within DaVinci Resolve. I don't use any fancy plugins whatsoever. I just made sure that my levels were balanced. So I obviously mixed each and every individual track, and just listened to it all the time. And I think that's what most sound engineers actually do.
Very time consuming, but
it's like testing it on a set of headphones or testing it on monitors, speakers. Yeah, it's just mixing it out and just trial and error, using some of my 20-year knowledge of being a sound engineer. And half of these things I forgot. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I graduated like a couple of years ago. And I just found my sound engineer, we called it the sound engineer Bible, because it's like a ton of like information of like how to like obviously be a sound engineer for live sound and studio sound and all of that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many of that stuff I forgot. And a lot of the stuff I'm doing is stuff that I've learned over the years, and and I've applied, using my ear to listen, because I understand frequencies a little bit better now. So a lot of the stuff that I do is out of instinct, and I think I always tell my wife.
But it comes from experience. For it. It's the same thing with shooting stuff. If you practice and practice and practice, before you know it, you don't have to pay attention to all those details. You just do it.
I work with audio every day of my life.
Yep.
I'm a voiceover actor, and I do radio production and stuff like that. So I basically work with audio every single day. So it comes naturally because I've got so much practice to do it.
That happens to me with video. It's being able to chop things up, select what's good, throw away what's bad. You know what I'm saying? And put things together and assembling it on a timeline.
Yeah.
Being able to edit on the action, the juxtaposition of different shots and things like that, where I can do it fast because I did it for so many years all day long.
Yeah. It becomes second nature after a while.
Yeah. Tell me about your BTS, your behind the scenes video, because so you were talking about being a one person, production. And while you're doing the production work, you're filming behind the scenes, like a little mini documentary, basically.
Yeah.
That's quite a challenge.
Yeah, because your mind shifts between the actual recording that you're doing for the video, as well as filming for the behind the scenes. So I just set up my little pocket size camera, as well as my mirrorless camera. I set them up on a tripod, and I just hit record, and I would just like momentarily go and see if it's still recording. Because I still have an old A7 III Sony camera that has a 30-minute record limit. So then I have to go every 30 minutes to go hit record again.
Oh, I see, yeah.
So luckily I had like two 128 gigabyte SD cards in there. So I had enough space to record. And my little pocket-sized camera needs external power because after like 45 minutes, that dies. So I had that on a charging brick. So I had to, like, between takes, I would just go to see if it's still recording.
And then you were doing your own. You were doing your selfie takes,
Yes. So I was vlogging.
Yeah.
What they call. So I was vlogging just to update.
Vlogging, for everybody out there now, is now called selfie takes.
Selfie takes.
That's what you can say. Susie invented a new way of calling vlogging selfie takes.
Selfie takes. Yeah. So the thing is, when I do stuff like that, I really want to give people a sense of like what it looks like behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I did that with like all my videos, where I did BTS, because it's like it's a great resource for any filmmaker to have to see what it looked like from behind the scenes, because it might look cinematic in the final product, and it looks brilliant. It's color graded. It's got filters. It's got everything. It's cinematic.
Yeah.
But it's not as glamorous as the final product. I mean, you still have to work to get it to that point. So it's nice to have like a bit of a behind the scenes video.
Come on. Like Steven Spielberg, right? Indiana Jones, every one of those films always has behind the scenes. But I actually worked, one of the first times I was working on a film project where I was told that, hey, do you mind recording behind the scenes stuff? So there's always that. A lot of people forget about that, but it's important. Because later you go, oh, we only have the finalized video. It's really cool if everybody, if I could show people what it took to put that together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super important because it gives you a sense of what people have to go through to create stuff. And it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort. And if you got the budget for it, it's a lot of man and woman power to get stuff done. And as much as smartphone filmmaking is often a solo project because of budget constraints, it does take a community of creators to make something happen. And it's always great if you can collaborate with like-minded creators. So yeah, the behind the scenes just gives you a sense of what it takes to make a film.
Well, definitely. And a lot of filmmakers as well, they kind of, they're artists, right? So they look at it, their perspective when they're looking at their finished work is always like, it's not really finished. I could still do this and make it better. And sometimes you just need to see your own behind the scenes to realize, well, you know what? I really did work pretty hard on this, to pat your own self in the back sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I appreciate with the ones that I have, because I often go and I look back and I'm like, wow, I didn't know anything about filmmaking before 2020, right? I didn't know what an ISO was. I didn't know what shutter speed was. I didn't know what an aperture was, right? And, by the grace of a shutdown, because of a virus, I had an opportunity to finally settle down and learn something new, and smartphone filmmaking was it, because it was accessible. I had the knowledge, I had the understanding in front of me for free. There was a lot of creators that were creating YouTube videos. I attended the Mobile Filmmaking Summit, which was a free thing because we all were locked down.
Yeah. We're going to put the link to that episode, by the way, because you talked about all that stuff. That was when we had our podcast with you, where we met.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And 2020, that's where I learned as much as I could. I absorbed as much information as possible. And look, 3 years later, I'm making films. And yeah, it's...
So you're not doing the sound engineer stuff now?
No, that's my day job. The day job is a audio engineer, sound engineer, voice actor. I create a lot of audio productions on a daily basis. So that's the day job. So I'm still very much in that. Still passionate about sound, because it's theater of the mind.
Yeah, I remember. That's right. You said that in the last one. You've said that a few times to me. The theater of the mind.
Theater of the mind.
Yeah, it was. We in the courses that I took in media communications, audio was one of them, and that was the exact same term that they used as well.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of in post production, sound engineers and what they call sometimes Foley engineers. They, you've seen it in behind the scenes where they record walking sound effects or slashing sound effects or the horror sound effects in post production.
So cool. Yeah,
and they mix that together. So a lot of the stuff is not captured in camera. Even some of the dialogues are redubbed.
Yeah.
After the movie is done, because piecing the story together, audio plays a massive role in creating a film, the holistic experience that you get.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's why filmmaking or a smartphone filmmaking for me was so easy, because I already had that knowledge of understanding how to do recordings, because a lot of the stuff that I do for radio, like I said, theater of the mind, is basically movies for audio.
Yeah, the old radio shows. Remember that they were movies, right? Basically, but they were performed live on radio. No video, no cameras. It was just them in front of microphones reenacting a scene, like a play, like reading a play. But then they were doing all the all the sound effects right there with cowbells and sticks and
Yes.
spoons and whatever it took.
Yeah, and that's my background. So just putting a picture in front of that was just like the icing on the cake.
That is so cool. We're having such a cool conversation here. Because I just think that's fascinating. You know, I mean, on the video, it's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. Just being behind the camera, capturing everything. But I just think during post-production, I think video is part of the ingredients, you know, that you have to capture. Just like, you know, the audio, the dialogue, and all those things. But I think it's really, you're really cooking when you do the post-production.
Yeah.
Because mixing, right?
Yep.
Mixing
That's
the ingredients.
Yep.
And
that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. So you were using so you used DaVinci for everything then, because they have the color grading, they have the audio. They also have like motion effects and things like that you can do there.
Yeah, I haven't even touched on a lot of those things, to be honest with you, because I switched from Adobe Premiere over to DaVinci Resolve.
Yeah.
And it's a different kettle of fish in terms of the steep learning curve.
Oh my God, I know.
DaVinci. So yeah, I just basically learned the basics. What I love about DaVinci Resolve is that I was able to customize my shortcut keys. And because I use Pro Tools a lot for audio production, I just set up my Pro Tools shortcut keys. And when I do my editing, I'm actually editing the audio in the timeline. So I go to the audio and I edit the audio, and then I see what it looks like on the visuals. So that's my editing technique. I actually edit the audio itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, steep learning curve. So I haven't even touched like a lot of the effects that you can do in DaVinci Resolve. But I love the fact that it's it's a in-house. You don't have to go external to mix anything or create effects or anything like that. I like the fact that everything is in one software, and it's just part of my goal of minimalist filmmaking or sound recording, because I don't like too much stuff.
Well, do you have anything else that you'd like to share?
Not really. I just, I was looking forward to this conversation with you. I haven't spoken in a while, and just catching up. I feel that as a filmmaker, I've matured since the last time we spoke. And yeah, I'm just very grateful and that I have this privilege of creating stuff and people get to watch it and enjoy it. I sometimes don't, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, I don't often do things for reaction, but I do appreciate that there is this massive community of like-minded smartphone filmmakers that show appreciation. Like one thing that I've noticed about the smartphone smartphone filmmaking community, is like no one has egos.
Well, are you still able to talk to your wife about mobile filmmaking, by the way?
She loves it.
Okay.
My wife is, we talk about it all the time. We've got ideas together.
Because I remember the last episode, you were like, I know she gets tired of me talking about it all the time.
No, my wife has been such a pillar in my life, because once she started seeing that these the end result of the films.
Yeah.
And she was like, wow, you did that with a phone. She's into it. I think I'm going to start using her on set as my the second camera person to record stuff. Because my wife encourage
her to do it.
Yeah, she's very into it. Very supportive. and she's also matured since the last time we spoke.
And your son,
it.
your eldest son, he just graduated, right? So
yeah, he's 19.
Yeah.
So I shot a little young music video with him the other day.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's I'm privileged that I have like access to like, you know, my own immediate family that are also creators. I can do stuff with them and pass on that knowledge to the next generation in my family.
You have you have them on Instagram, the Olsens or something, right?
Yeah, meet the Olsens. That was a little that was a little thing that we started as a family, because you know, we often have these interesting conversations, and funny enough, people started finding that funny, and we were like, okay, let's.
You have a very spunky little daughter, your youngest daughter. Oh my God, she's so cute.
Yeah, Alessandra. She's such a very energetic 5-year-old.
Yes.
And it's fantastic, man. The thing is, like I said, I've got my day job and I'm grateful for that. And, you know, smartphone filmmaking is a creative outlet for me. So I think in my initial conversation that I had with you before we, did the recording, when we were setting up, I told you that I'm working on something. So it's been about 2 years in the making. It's going to be my first long form video. I think a lot of people they refer to it as a feature film, but I mean, it's not really a feature film, but it's going to be like long form. I'm aiming about 15 to 20 minutes.
That's still a short film.
Yeah, it's still a short film. And again, the idea is to have like a minimalist crew to tell the story, but it's going to be it comes back to my background, because I grew up in a very religious household. I
remember. Yes.
Yeah, so I grew up in a very religious household, so God and Christianity and stuff like that was a very important part in my upbringing, for especially for my family. I'm not as religious as my family, but I do have a strong
spiritual
connection with side. Yes, I do. I'm not religious, but I still try and keep myself grounded spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
So the film comes from like a lot of misconceptions from religion, right? And it puts into question a couple of things. It kind of humanizes God in a sense. And I know people don't like that, because some people might consider it to be blasphemous, but the story is more along the lines of like, there's this entity, and there's certain information that has come into fruition, and what is the reaction going to be? So it follows this character who goes onto this journey, and there's a lot of obstacles in the way, and basically the establishment is trying to keep it hush, because they don't want the greater human race to realize that there's this thing. So
this is truly a narrative film, huh?
Yeah. So it's a narrative film. It has a beginning, middle, and an end. It's going to be. We're gonna have actors in the film. I'm still looking for my main character. I still have not found the right person that I feel could embody this character. And I've got the location already. I think I've got about 2 or 3 locations where I've envisioned where I want to shoot this. So it's just basically putting everything together and start shooting it. I mean, I've been writing the script for about 2 years.
Wow.
So I'm very excited to finally get this done. But I'm also not pushing myself. I'm not putting myself under pressure to create it. I'm hoping this is going to be my Sistine Chapel. It's going to be my Mona Lisa. Yeah, we'll see what happens after that. But yeah, this is again another passion project that I'm looking forward to making. And
do you need collaborators or anything like that?
I haven't even gotten to that point yet, to be honest with you. I'm still in the planning phase. I'm still finalizing scripting and all of that. And it's just purely having to make time for it.
Yeah, because once you're ready to go in production, that's when the pressure comes, because you can't have people involved and just kind of waiting.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, it's on me to make it happen. And I should just try to be less busy, because sometimes we people that are busy being busy all the time, and then we don't make time for stuff like that. So I really want to put time aside to actually make it. It's gonna take about 6 weeks to make. I figured. So I need to get actors and production crew that are willing to commit for six weeks.
Well, that's why I was thinking, because since we're talking about this in the podcast, maybe some of our listeners out there in the area. Where are you in South Africa? You said Johannesburg, or? So
Johannesburg, yeah. But the landscape in South Africa is so tiny. I mean, people from Cape Town and Durban, it's accessible. So I'm actually going to shoot in multiple locations, to be honest with you. One of the locations that I've identified is at the coast. So nice. If someone is in the KwaZulu-Natal, Durban area that's listening, if you're keen to partner on the project, maybe we can touch base and start talking about it.
Yeah.
Because the location it's about 6 hours from Johannesburg, so it's not that far.
Wow.
And there will be food and accommodation.
Right. Pizza and Pepsi.
Yeah.
No.
I'll feed you, and I'll give you a bed to rest your
head. And credit,
and credit, and compensation.
Look, Brionne is very well connected. I mean, come on. Well, that sounds fantastic. That sounds exciting. I'm excited. I follow you, and I'll stay on top of it, and we'll have you back on when you're knee deep into your production. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
We'll wait for you to finish it.
and the fact that I put it out there now, I have to do it now.
Oh, you have to.
Yeah, it's like everybody knows about it. Hey, Brionne is making his.
The whole world is listening.
His Mona Lisa, and he has to finish the painting.
Like that Mona Lisa song. In the meantime, for people who don't want to read the notes, but you guys, the notes are right there. What are your follow? Because you have
the
several,
hashtags and my handles. Yeah, it's at Brionne Olsen. So it's Brionne Olsen. It's BRIONNEOLSEN. On everything.
Yeah.
Instagram, Twitter.
There's only one Brionne Olsen, and that's you.
The only Brionne Olsen that does smartphone filmmaking, and the very few that smartphone filmmakers from South Africa.
Yes. All right. So Brionne Olsen with 2 N's on Instagram, on Twitter. Are you on Facebook too?
Yeah, I don't like Facebook.
Oh, that's right. You are. We're connected on Facebook. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not really crazy about Facebook either.
I don't pay attention to a lot of stuff on Facebook, to be honest with you. But yeah, I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Threads.
Yeah. All right, Brionne. Have a wonderful weekend. What a great way to
You
start
too.
it.
Yeah, amazing, man. Thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast again. It was fantastic to have a conversation with you. And, hopefully the next time we have a chat, I've got a couple of more films in the bag. And maybe this conversation could happen in your neck of the woods eventually when I do get to San Diego at some point in time.
Woohoo! I'm hopeful for that. That sounds exciting. And so does your new film. And seriously, I wish you the very best with that film.
Thank you so much.
All right, say goodbye to our listeners.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time.